Hello, and good afternoon. Today I'll be talking about augmented reality and the next generation of the web. My name is Marley Rafson. I'm a software engineer on the WebXR team at Google, and this is, in fact, my Bitmoji. So to begin, let's get everybody on the same page here. What is augmented reality? So augmented reality is the mixing of computer-generated content with the real world. And sometimes during this presentation, you'll hear me say AR, and that just stands for augmented reality. So today, augmented reality looks like the things you see behind me. Experiences like Pokemon Go. And if you look, you'll see the computer-generated content mixing with information about the real world. So with the rainbow example, you'll see it sliding across the ground because the phone knows where that is. And in the adorable example of the lion, it's getting scared when the lights turn off. So if you want to access augmented reality experiences today, you could do so in generally one of two ways. So one would be with an AR-enabled smartphone, and with that, you're accessing the 3D content overlaid on your camera feed and accessing it through a 2D plane. And more naturally would be something like a head-mounted display, because it's on your head, and hypothetically, your hands are free to interact with the content. And in the future, we would hope that these head-mounted displays would be as subtle and socially acceptable as the glasses on my face right now. So if you asked me, Marley, how do you imagine a future with augmented reality? Well, I would start by imagining my day-to-day today and building from there. So maybe I'm hungry and I'm walking down the street. And as I'm walking down the street, I see Yelp data popping up on restaurants as I'm walking by. And it's coming to me just when I want it, not before. And so as I'm walking, I can see things like the rating of the restaurant, what type of food it's going to give me, and things like that. But more than that is maybe I want to do a lot of different things at once. And maybe I want to access a ton of content while I'm doing it. So maybe that's I'm walking down the street, I see the restaurant information, but I'm also catching Pokemon, and my email's up. And when I get to the BART in the Muni station, the timetables are there, so I know which one to take. What's also extremely important is that this is accessible. I should be able to use whatever device I want. So maybe one day that's my Apple head-mounted display, and another day it's my lightweight glasses. But what's interesting is that if we're able to translate information between those types of devices, we can also translate it into much different formats. So if I preferred to get my content audibly, then I could wear AR-enabled headphones and still have access to the content. You could also, if you were looking for a lower price point, you could access this content in 2D text on a flip phone or something like that. And so what I said earlier was that I wanted access to a whole ocean of information, but in reality, that's not true. That would be overwhelming. So what I should be able to do is take that huge and vast amount of context and slim it down to what I actually want to see. And this becomes interesting because you could specify what sources you want to see by default and what time of the day you actually want to see them. And another example of this, where the user's in control, that I find personally super interesting, is imagine that I don't want the content to render super close to me. So what I prefer is content can only render 5 feet away from me at closest. But for another person, they could say just 1 foot is fine, but it should be the user that decides. So when we start talking about a future of augmented reality in a way that it's providing contextualized information that's highly scalable, it occurs simultaneously, it's accessible, it's user-driven, and it's secure, then all of a sudden, the future of augmented reality starts to sound a lot like the modern web. And that's where my team comes in. So my team is dreaming about that future of augmented reality and building towards it, beginning at where the web is today. We believe strongly in the joint nature of a future of augmented reality with something a lot like the web. So an example is something that we publicly released last month. Here, what you're seeing behind me is an article about a spacesuit. So imagine you're scrolling down this web page, and you come to a 3D model. And you look at that model and you wonder, how tall is that? The height's in meters, and I only know my height in feet. So with augmented reality, what you could do is just pop it into space. And you can actually see what that looks like. And all of a sudden, this experience is much more rich and informative than it was before. What's funny and completely coincidental is that since we released this, we've seen Facebook announce incorporation of 3D content into the newsfeed. We've seen Wikipedia announce that they're going to host 3D content in their articles. So this future is extremely plausible, and I hope that we see it soon. So now, how did we build these things? Well, if you didn't know, web browsers are already really good at doing 3D content. So what you're seeing behind me is extremely beautiful and is actually just a web page. So what the goal was is to turn that 3D content into content that's existing in the real world. So what we had to do was build experimental web browsers. So what you see on this slide behind me is one of our browsers running on a tablet, and as you tap on the screen and move the phone, a cube is appearing. So since we've built those browsers, we've been experimenting ever since. Augmented reality is good for a lot of things, such as art, or increasing educational content, such as how do you interact with a museum that you don't have physical access to? Or maybe you want to see a renovation on your house before it's done. Everything that goes on the web is collaborative. So it's not just us working on these things. We're publicly releasing everything as we go on. So we have collaborators that are individuals. There's other browsers who are doing amazing things as well. And it's a really fun and fast-moving space. So for this last portion of my talk, I want to talk about something that I'm super excited about. So behind me, what you see is Lesbians Who Tech website embedded into augmented reality. And in front of me, what you see is a whole bunch of Lesbians Who Tech. But to be serious, so this is exciting because what it says is that we're able to incorporate existing web technologies, HTML and CSS, into 3D space. So here's another example. This is also just smaller HTML components, but still HTML, styled with CSS, including those animations, and you're making a rich AR experience. And so you can imagine a future when making compelling AR content is as easy as making a web page today. So you can imagine an experience where you're adding depth to a website, or maybe you could specify something like, I want my web page to be 30 meters away and on the side of a building. And so what's fundamentally exciting about this is that it makes AR accessible. It means that everyone can participate in creating augmented reality content, and that will democratize the space and make it non-proprietary. So if the future of augmented reality and the next generation of the web is one that's accessible, it's one that has tons of content that makes our day-to-day more enhanced and better, it's secure and it's user-driven, then I'm excited, and I hope that you are too.